LeSean McCoy on if he thinks the Browns should add a quarterback to the room this offseason.
Always get more competition. It makes every player better.
Yeah.
I think all my years in the NFL, when I didn't have a certain backup behind me, I still want to compete and do really, really well. But it's a sense of having somebody behind me that is really, really good too. I got to stay on my job. And I think if you do bring a guy in for Shedeur Sanders, I think it helps him out.
Yeah.
It makes him play better. I think that from you look at his career from coaching or playing underneath his dad as the coach, he's always had to that chip on the shoulder. I got to prove it. Well, now you really do. Then you bring a backup in there. I think it'd be the perfect thing for Shedeur Sanders.
So, Tom, I guess the question is, are there veterans or do they do it via draft? Todd Monken has to have an input. The veteran names out there, Malik Willis, Kyler Murray, Tua, Anthony Richardson. Now there's some talk that C.J. Stroud, the Texans may listen to trade for him. Is there any veteran that intrigues you?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think the veteran that intrigues me the most, to be honest, right now is Deshaun Watson because, for my money, and I know this is going to irritate some Browns fans, he's the best quarterback you have on that roster right now, as long as he's healthy. I'll use the caveat there because he is coming off of, two Achilles ruptures, still that shoulder surgery, which obviously sidetracked and derailed, whatever momentum he had created in his second year here. So to me, that's still the interesting one, and how he fits in or whether he does or not. In terms of Sanders, I'll disagree with McCoy there in that he really has not had to have a chip on his shoulder while playing for his dad. There was really no competition that he really had to worry about. He was going to be plugged into that starter role no matter what. I do think that Shedeur did show us some maturity last year in the way he handled the situation here. There's a lot was made of him not getting enough reps or any reps for that matter with the first team during training camp. And then, he kind of worked his way up, if you will. And obviously with the Flacco trade, with Gabriel not performing up to what the Browns had hoped he could do, Shedeur was thrown out there and he did a more than admirable job, in going 3-4. As we've talked about, there were some real good moments and there were some real bad ones. So to McCoy's point, I agree with him that competition means everything. I do know that the Browns are on a daily basis right now trying to figure out what route they're going to take. As I mentioned before, with those 2 first-round picks, if there's a quarterback you fall in love with, then maybe that's the route you go as high as number 6 in the draft. We'll see there. But there's going to be plenty of other options out there. Malik Willis is the hot name right now only because when he had to come off the bench for the Packers this year, he played well. And he's one of these, reclamation projects that we've seen, Dave, over, the last couple of years. Sam Darnold being the most recent example. Malik Willis was taken high and, 2 or 3 years ago, did not perform well in Tennessee, got a kind of a fresher start with Green Bay and seems to be tracking as to one of those guys who is, going to find it a little deeper into his career than originally thought. So there's plenty of options for the Browns here. In terms of whether Gabriel's going to be back on this roster or not, that remains to be seen. Trades are always a possibility, but free agency is obviously something the Browns will very seriously consider to find that franchise quarterback.
Doesn't Andrew Berry have to go and ask Todd Monken, and I'm asking everybody this, what quarterback can you win with? Be it on the roster
I think that's
or
one of
X, Y, and Z. You hired that guy because he's an offensive mind. He should tell you who to go and get.
Well, I think that was one of the biggest selling points, as far as I'm concerned, Dave, with Todd Monken, is that he's shown at Georgia and at Baltimore he can win with different kinds of quarterbacks and different kinds of systems. I mean, if anybody watched that Georgia team that won the national championship a few years ago, it's Stetson Bennett, who was not necessarily regarded as one of the top quarterbacks in college football, and he got the most out of him. He got that offense to move up and down the field, like nobody's business in the SEC, which is saying something, and, right on through the, semifinals and into the championship game. So, Monken has shown an ability to, get them, like I said before, get the most out of his quarterbacks in whatever system he's run. The thing that I've mentioned to you before, Dave, that I find most intriguing is that Todd Monken knows what the best quarterback in the NFL is supposed to look like, right? He had Lamar Jackson. He had, arguably the most dynamic player in the NFL under his watch for a couple of seasons. And, and Lamar Jackson had his best passing year with Todd Monken at the controls. So if I was a Browns fan, I think I would take a lot of comfort in knowing that You're bringing in a head coach now who really understands that position, who really understands the current NFL and the way that it's structured and how you've got to be able to move the ball and score points. So he doesn't have Derrick Henry here as a complement to that offense, but he certainly knows how to use a quarterback.